Welcome to Audio Tales AI. In this episode, we unveil a dramatic story where secrets are laid bare in front of colleagues. Join us as we dive into the riveting narrative of how one fateful night changed everything. And if you're drawn to stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay connected with more audio experiences like this one.
For the past half hour, he had been observing his attractive wife as she navigated her way through the ballroom. Her intention was to position herself as far away from her husband as possible when the ball dropped at midnight. She was surrounded by well-off and self-satisfied peers, acting like an elaborate dish served for everyone's attention. Executives from his workplace would kiss and touch her, particularly his obnoxious boss who had been born wealthy. He was well aware of this routine, as his company's New Year's Eve parties had followed the same pattern for the past 2 years. During the first year, he had tolerated it, chalking it up to the effects of too much champagne. However, last year, the reality hit him hard, and he started making preparations to address the situation. Feeling a tug on his coat, he turned around to face Deirdre, Joan's closest friend and co-conspirator. "Happy New Year, Mike!" she exclaimed, reaching up to give him a somewhat pitiful kiss, an annual gesture. Their lips barely grazed before he pulled away and looked into her brown eyes. Deirdre was another socialite, coming from a wealthier family than Joan, and just like his wife, she was part of the upper echelon. Normally, he expected to see her usual, self-assured smirk, implying that she held some secret knowledge he didn't possess due to her high social status. But this time, he saw two new emotions on her face, pity and concern. "Mike, don't take this so seriously," she said soothingly. "She's just engaging in the custom of exchanging kisses on New Year's. She'll come back to you shortly without any harm done. She'll remind you how much she loves you." He gave her a doubtful look. Deirdre attempted to offer him reassurance. "She truly loves you, you know. It's just that she's very outgoing, lively and impulsive, whereas you tend to be more intellectual and reserved. Sometimes she needs a chance to be around people who share her nature. However, being with them only reinforces her love for you." "All right, Deirdre, is that why she spent the entire Christmas party hanging out with her co-workers under the mistletoe?" "We attend her Christmas party, and she spends the night dancing and being affectionate with her colleagues. Then, here at my company's New Year's Eve event, she spends the whole night dancing and kissing, though not with my firm's executives. So by being intimate with everyone at the party except me, she's supposed to somehow gain a new appreciation for me. It's an interesting theory. Let me ask you, is this her annual tradition of giving George the imbecile a dozen kisses, or is it her way of showing love for me by doing something she knows I detest?" Gotta hand it to Deirdre. She managed to look embarrassed. She couldn't meet my gaze, so she averted her eyes and tried to continue. "Mike, I understand you're upset, but you have to try to see it from her perspective, don't you?" "Deirdre, I think I might actually understand, perhaps for the first time in our 5-year marriage." I turned away from her, went back to our table, reached into a briefcase I'd placed there earlier, and pulled out a rather large, brightly wrapped gift. I turned away from her, took off the ring from my finger, and placed it in the center of the bow. This would make her remove the ring to open the gift. Facing Deirdre, I extended the package to her. "I'm going to head out now. Please give this to your friend when she's finally able to break free from the crowd around her. Let her know I wish her a happy new year, and I hope she finds everything she deserves in the upcoming year." I began to leave, but Deirdre grabbed my arm. "Don't leave, Mike. I'll go fetch her. She's had too much champagne again. You need to take her home." "No, Deirdre, I don't have to. She has a room reserved here in the hotel. She's been here all day entertaining the men while I've been working." "Of course. You're aware of all this because you've been here with her. She has her own car, clothes, and everything she needs. I'm pretty sure at least one of the guys she's spending time with right now will be more than willing to accommodate her. Or maybe all of them will. Don't give me that look. You fed me the same line last year when I gave her another chance. She's made her choice. And so have I. Goodbye, Deirdre. I have to admit it'll be a relief for me to never have to see you again." Walking out of the ballroom, I gave a nod to Helen, the HR director. I had spent the first half of the day with her while my boss and his buddies were busy setting things up at the hotel. To be honest, he was actually in a fancy suite, which he paid for using the company credit card. Sleeping with my wife, that is. I should correct myself, though. They were actually sleeping in the luxury suite. My wife and I have evidence in the form of photos and videos to prove it. Helen also has some of this evidence, and the chairman of the board will be informed about it very soon. After leaving the ballroom, Helen and her husband moved toward the group of men surrounding Joan. Deirdre was also navigating her way through this group of men, some of whom persisted in attempting to kiss her as part of the tradition. A few men tried to flirt with Helen, but her husband's disapproving expression, a former American soccer forward, seemed to discourage them. Helen made her way through the crowd until she reached CEO George Burke and his companion, who were just ahead of Deirdre. A few feet away from them, she paused with her husband and observed Deirdre's puzzled expression. Then, the sound of Deirdre's name being called out sharply caught Joan's attention, causing her to break away from George's embrace. Upon noticing her friend's surprised look, Deirdre frowned. Helen, on the other hand, smiled. Deirdre held out a beautifully wrapped gift and said something to Joan, who accepted the package. She leaned in closer, appearing to ask Deirdre to repeat what she had just said. "Mike left this for you." "He's gone, Joan," Deirdre told her friend. "He watched you flirt and make out all night. And when you started making out with all those men, he gave me that package and left." Joan grinned. "Oh, you know Mike. He gets all worked up when I don't pay attention to him for a little while. I'll go home, say sorry, give him a good time in bed, and everything will be back to normal. He loves me. Even when he's mad, he leaves me a gift. Let's see what it is." Deirdre tried to interject. "Joan, I don't think it's a present." But Joan was already busy untying the ribbon to open the package. As the ring fell out and hit the floor, there was a pause. Joan looked puzzled and asked, "What's this?" Deirdre, who had been watching, bent down, picked up the ring, and extended it toward her with a smirk. "Isn't that your husband's wedding ring?" Joan stopped unwrapping the gift, stared at him, perplexed, and took the ring. She glanced at Deirdre, who quietly muttered, "I tried to tell you." Undeterred, Joan continued tearing off the wrapping from the present, revealing a white gift box inside. Feeling relieved, she smiled, gave the box a little shake, remarked on its weight, and began to peel off the tape on each side using her fingernail. As the tape on the third side came off, the contents of the box spilled out, scattering across the floor. She crouched down to gather the glossy sheets that had fallen. Others also squatted to help pick up the ones that had slid away. All of a sudden everyone came to a halt. Joan's eyes widened and she shouted, "No!" Her cry grabbed the attention of those nearby, and more people gathered around them. Deirdre's eyes also widened in disbelief. She looked up and saw the horror-struck expression on George's face. He picked up a large glossy color photograph measuring 20 by 30 centimeters from the ground, placed it against his expensive suit, and involuntarily yelled, "What the heck, Joan?" He said it loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Everyone's attention turned to the scattered pictures, which depicted Joan engaging in sexual activities with people other than her husband. There were numerous images of Joan with George, as well as Joan alongside other executives from the company where Mike and Joan worked, including her colleagues and bosses. While the pictures didn't cover every position, Mike had carefully chosen ones that clearly showed Joan engaging in shocking activities with both men and women in various combinations and quantities. Confronted with these graphic photos of her sexual escapades, Joan fainted. She fell onto her back, and George's shoe prevented her head from hitting the tile floor, potentially causing a concussion. Deirdre knelt down next to her, lifted her head, lightly slapped her face, and urgently shouted, "Joan, Joan, are you okay? Talk to me, Joan." As both women lay on the floor, others began picking up the pictures and examining them. A woman turned and struck her husband with all her might just as he was looking at the picture he held. "You're a cheater," she exclaimed. "No wonder you don't have the energy left to satisfy me." He stared at her in shock, and then she swung her purse, landing a punch on his right eye. He grimaced in pain and then crumbled to the floor when she kicked him in the groin with her pointed shoe. The woman knelt down and systematically went through the pictures scattered on the ground. She paused, glanced up, and declared, "You ladies who are married to the higher-ups at Taylor & Son might want to check out some of these photos. There are images of other husbands in here as well. If you're looking to save on divorce attorneys, give me a call, and we can explore a group rate." 9 other women knelt down, joining her and examining the photos, causing the men to back away. "There are also flash drives here," one of them announced loudly. "Who knows what's on them?" A woman directed her anger at a well-dressed older man, shouting, "You dirty cheater. Remember our prenup? You're financially ruined, you jerk." The man tried to explain, saying, "Baby, I'm sorry. It didn't mean anything. She kept coming on to me, and eventually I gave in. But it happened only once. And she wasn't as good as you anyway. You're lying. Liar," the blonde woman shouted, holding out 2 more pictures. The blonde woman stood up from the floor, her eyes filled with anger, and she confronted him, waving the pictures and unleashing a string of profanities. He stepped back, turned, and fled. Meanwhile, the other woman sobbed, clutching her chest with one hand and holding a photograph with the other. Her husband, hiding his face in his hands, was also in tears. The man took out a photo, holding it up to the attractive woman standing in front of him, and exclaimed loudly, "So you're bisexual? What the heck is this? You kept telling me there would never be a threesome because you wouldn't be with another woman." She blushed, turned around, and hurried away, struggling in her 10-inch heels. Another woman chose several photos from the pile and began calling out names as she headed toward the center of the ballroom. The puzzled woman stopped her, picked up a photo, stared at it, and turned to her husband with a furious expression. He started to back away and she quickly moved toward him, waving the photograph. This situation repeated 5 more times, with each victim's friends also being hit in their ears and eyes. Note, the original text included asterisks here, which I replaced with explanatory text. Joan was already awake, observing the chaos around her with dazed eyes. A man in an elegant tuxedo knelt beside her and inquired, "Are you okay?" She looked at him with curiosity and nodded. He asked, "Who are you? Can I help you?" She responded solemnly, "I'm Joan Lord. But I don't believe anyone can assist me at this point." "Are you Joan Reynolds, Lord?" he asked in disbelief. She nodded and inquired, "Yes, I am." "And who are you?" The man handed her the stack of papers he was carrying, took a photo of her with his phone and loudly declared, "I am the bailiff, you've been served. Joan Reynolds, Lord." These documents, along with the accompanying photos and videos, substantiate the cheating claimed in Michael Morris Lord's divorce petition. He turned toward the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't had a chance to review the photos, you can simply request a copy of the divorce papers, which are public records accessible online. They list the names of all the individuals Joan W.B. has engaged in sexual activity with over the past year, along with when and where. For a small fee, I can provide a link to Joan QB's website, which comprehensively details her actions since January 1st of the previous year. If you wish to examine this information to determine whether your spouse has been involved in intimate relationships with SHB and threesomes, or more, you can contact me via Cheating Spouse Pie-Comb. For an additional fee, I'll provide a link to her site. I can supply digital copies of the participants' actions. This evidence will prove invaluable in court. I anticipate your response." He bowed deeply and walked away, leaving behind a trail of tears, fear, and panic. He might face consequences for this act in the future, but he was compensated handsomely for it. Plus, being in New York and having his office in New Jersey, where his influential family held sway, offered him a sense of security. Joan still had the divorce papers in her lap, resting in her friend's arms, her mouth open in confusion. She glanced at the faces around her, seeing a mix of hatred, pity, anger, and unease. The usual mixture of admiration, desire, and jealousy that she had experienced throughout her privileged life was conspicuously absent. The full weight of her loss and shame hit her, and she held on to Deirdre tightly, burying her face in her friend's chest, sobbing uncontrollably. George Taylor instructed his subordinates to gather the incriminating pictures and destroy them. Looking directly at Helen, he commanded, "I want a reprimand letter from Mike Lord on my desk by Monday, with the termination papers underneath." Helen responded with a neutral expression, "I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, but Mr. Lord resigned this afternoon. He provided 2 weeks' notice, utilized the vacation time you approved last week, packed up all his belongings, and left the building." Mr. Taylor's response was firm. "I won't accept his resignation. I'll fire him after giving him a reprimand. He won't find work in this industry again." However, Helen continued, "I apologize again, Mr. Taylor, but he spoke to the chairman of the board before leaving. Your father accepted his resignation. Mr. Lord has already secured another position with a firm he previously consulted for. With your written approval, sir." Mr. Taylor's face was so red that people around were worried he might have a stroke. He was angrily swearing at his father and Mike Lord. Helen and her husband found this situation amusing, holding hands and enjoying the embarrassment. They didn't show their amusement on their faces, though. Mike Lord drove from New York in a new four-wheel drive Chevy High Country Suburban with a big turbo diesel engine. He had ordered this special engine in addition to the regular features. He ordered the SUV in the fall as soon as the new models were available and received it yesterday. According to the GPS, it would take around 24 hours and 32 minutes to reach his new home in Austin, Texas, using the route he chose. However, he knew it would likely take him almost a week because he planned to experience and learn about the culture of the rural states he would be passing through. When he reached Virginia, he planned to avoid the main highways and take the scenic country roads mentioned in Joan and Denver's songs. He also wanted to explore the small towns in the Carolinas that Mary Chapin Carpenter sang about. He was excited to try the local homemade jellies and jams sold at small stores along the roadside. He intended to eat where the locals did, away from the busy highways and the lifestyle he had grown tired of. Mike and his wife had separate checking and savings accounts, but this changed after he bought his SUV. Because she had earned 10 times more money than him during their marriage, buying an $88,000 car wouldn't really balance things out. Still, he was fine using some of her money to purchase it. As per his proposal, he would keep his investments in retirement funds, and she would hold on to hers. If she agreed to his generous terms and signed the divorce papers within 10 days, he wouldn't make any claims on her penthouse or trust fund. The car's radio was set to play the best classic country music on Sirius XM station called The Roadhouse. Joan disliked country music almost as much as he disliked retro music, so he'd switch to the classic vinyl station next. He was his own person now, no longer the uninformed husband she had portrayed him as for the last couple of years. When the New Year's ball dropped the previous year, he had taken control of his life and spent the entire year organizing his thoughts. Perhaps Taylor & Son, the company he used to be part of, would survive after he left, but he didn't believe it would do well. Operating under George's poor leadership and lacking the design improvements and patents he had contributed over the last 5 years, he anticipated it would collapse within a year or two. He found satisfaction in this idea, knowing that his efforts had driven more than half of the new sales and profits in the previous year. He also had top-notch designs and improvements ready to implement as soon as his new company became operational. Oh, his former boss, who is now the head of the board, and George's father, Randolph Taylor, would likely sell the company before it failed. However, George would be revealed as the incapable fraud he truly was before that point. The idea of that made him happy. Tonight, he had successfully portrayed George and his own unfaithful wife as immoral members of society with no principles. In the next year, when his new company outperformed his old one, he would expose George's lack of business skills, just like squashing a bug on a windshield. Thinking about this brought a smile to his face. He didn't mind being a fly on the wall, observing when Joan's parents learned about his actions at the ball. Helen had already called him to share the positive outcome. The fact that she had spread the photos all over the ballroom was even better than he had hoped, although he had intentionally designed the box to fall apart when the film was cut on 3 sides. Her parents had always looked down on him, and they were disappointed when their precious daughter decided to marry him. They thought he wasn't good enough, especially because he didn't have an Ivy League education. The reality that his engineering degree from the Colorado School of Mines and master's degree from the University of Michigan made him highly sought after in his field mattered more than an arts degree from Brown University. With a smile, he thought about the chaos he had caused and the achievements he would create in the future. Deirdre and her husband Albert drove Joan back home right after they entered the house, and she took a look around. Joan began crying again. During the ride home, she practiced what she would say to Mike. She needed to clarify that her affairs didn't mean much to her and weren't damaging their marriage. She wanted to explain that these were like a break or an effort to influence decisions that affected both her and Mike, aiming to improve their lives. She tried to justify that casual sexual encounters actually helped them. They helped her manage her strong sexual desire and also taught her things. She used to please her husband to add variety to their intimate life. It sounded ridiculous, even to herself, and she was fully aware that Mike wouldn't believe it. The truth was he was very committed to their marriage vows. Even discussing the idea of swapping partners or engaging in role-play with others angered him. So why did she think he would accept the excuses she was planning to give? Deep down, she understood that her marriage was falling apart. However, when she entered their apartment and saw that all of his belongings were gone, she realized she had fallen into a pit she had created herself. She collapsed to the floor, crying and feeling bitter, blaming her own arrogance. She couldn't easily explain her actions because she never thought she would get caught. And if by some chance she did, she believed she could convince her kind, innocent husband to forgive her. For 3 years, she had been successful in hiding her actions. But tonight, he destroyed both their marriage and her reputation completely. The week went by swiftly for Mike. He copied his SIM card before throwing away the old one in the slushy city snow. This way he could reach out without any interruptions while traveling through the Old South on his way to his new home in Texas. He sent his custom emails throughout the week. Each spouse received a personalized email with an attachment, causing marriage after marriage to fall apart. The thought of this outcome brought a grin to Mike's face. He had mailed the letter to Deirdre's husband just yesterday. Mike felt a sense of satisfaction thinking about how Al might react. Although Joan was accountable for her actions, it was Deirdre's account of the pleasure she found in her affairs, along with her friend's encouragement to share the enjoyment by being promiscuous, that truly influenced Joan's decision. On the 4th day, back in New York, Deirdre and Joan sat on the couch in their apartment. Now it was just their apartment, as Al had kicked Deirdre out after receiving an email containing a video. The video included snippets of sexual activities and a revealing conversation between Joan and Deirdre, where they described their conquests and pleasures and listed the names of their lovers. They even laughed about their unsuspecting husbands. Albert forwarded this conversation to the wives of the women mentioned, especially if he knew them, which was often the case. The turmoil was spreading and Albert found satisfaction as he watched it unfold. Things weren't any better for George either. His father had fired him and cut him off from his inheritance. In fact, his father had also fired all the top executives who were responsible for the company's negative reputation due to their actions. His father was now acting as the CEO while his new vice president of talent development and attraction, Helen, was recruiting skilled executives from around the world. As he drove past, Mike skipped the Martin Luther King Boulevard exit and got ready to make a turn onto Cesar Chavez Street. He drove by the Austin Convention Center and noticed Lady Bird Lake on his left. He crossed Congress Avenue and parked at the exclusive high-rise apartment that his new company had arranged for him. He had paid 6 months' rent in advance for the apartment, which was on the 70th floor, and offered a view of the rainy city. This gave him time to search for the kind of house he had always wanted, complete with trees and a lawn. Once he was settled, he planned to get a dog and start looking for a reliable partner who would enjoy building a life with him and their children. His new business partners had already organized a barbecue event where they would introduce him as recently divorced, ensuring there would be plenty of eligible women there. Meanwhile, in New York City, the ongoing drama continued as exposed spouses implicated others and abusive partners shared information about other abusive partners. Alan kept Mike updated about the situation. He thought about the spreading chaos caused by the fire he had ignited in New York and couldn't help but smile. The more he learned, the more excited he became about his decision to move to Texas. He thought about it with a sense of finality, repeating, "Gone to Texas."
Thank you for joining us on this immersive journey with Audio Tales AI. If you enjoyed this captivating narrative, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on the power of audio storytelling. Stay connected with us for more tales that will ignite your imagination and emotions.